Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Fran and today we will be talking about free will once more, as there are so many theories about it, as there are about consciousness and its meaning. We will attempt to understand to what extent we are truly free to make decisions and if we are logical and rational in our decision-making process. Then we will explore how free will and our understanding and interpretation of it affects our decision-making and problem-solving ability. In the end, we will show that our interpretation of logic reasoning and free will crucially affects our ability to manifest. First of all, let's take a look at the different theories about free will. The most rational, and I put these in inverted commas, amongst us, maintain that of course we have free will, or else we would all be robots or puppets moved by some external or outer force. We wouldn't be making conscious decisions but merely following orders, all the while deluding ourselves with the belief that we are deliberately choosing to act in a certain way. Now, as far-fetched as this theory and as delirious as this explanation sounds, after all, we all have the distinct feeling that we are rationally, consciously and logically making decisions on a daily basis, to the point that we take this assumption for granted. Yet, experimental results have shown over and over again that this premise, this assumption, is dubious and faulty. A now famous experiment by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s, for instance, showed that the brain actually registers the decision to make a movement before a person consciously decides to move. In Libet's experiment, participants were asked to perform a simple task, such as flexing a wrist. They were sat in front of a timer and they were supposed to take notice of the time at which they were consciously aware of the decision to move. Attached to the scalp were EEG electrodes, which registered their brain activity. Libet showed consistently that there was brain activity linked to the decision before the participant was aware of having made the decision. Libet termed this activity the readiness potential. Now, what does this mean? What this means in practical terms is that the decision was unconscious and preceded the feeling of consciously choosing to move. In other words, the decision had been made on a subconscious level and only subsequently the logical part of the brain had registered the intention to take action. This also means that when we make decisions, we do so unconsciously, instinctively, on a hunch, and only a very short time afterwards we become aware of the decision to act. We may even come up with perfectly logical reasons as to why we have chosen to take a certain action, yet the rationalization of the decision comes after the decision itself. To put it simply, we act on a hunch and then we try to justify the decision to ourselves. We find logical reasons as to why we have acted as we did. We delude ourselves that we have freely chosen to act in a certain way after careful consideration. Yet our brain readings tell us that we had already made the decision before we were aware of it. After all, determinism implies that the fate of the universe is already established and that the only thing keeping us from knowing its future is our ignorance. In other words, the universe, according to determinism, evolves in predictable ways once we know the state of every particle in the universe. According to this theory, in principle, it would be possible to predict the future, and thus, no matter what decisions we make, our fate is already sealed. This would be consistent with Libet's findings, which prove that free will is but a powerful illusion. Yet, the most recent discoveries in quantum physics, in fact, not even that recent as they date back to the early 1900s, show that the state of the universe is anything but fixed. It's a quantum field of infinite possibilities, a quantum wave function of virtual probabilities actualized and affected by observation. Quantum physics shows that what collapses the wave function of infinite possibilities into a localized particle is the act of observation. This seems to imply that free will not only exists and is real, but that it also actively shapes the state of the universe in which we live. So we're at a crossroads. Are we conscious creators of our own fate and universe, or are we mindless puppets programmed to follow a predestined path? Does free will exist, or is it just a very powerful illusion? How can we reconcile Libet's findings with Bohr's findings? Now, Bohr was one of the founding fathers of quantum physics and of the Copenhagen interpretation, according to which observation collapses the wave function of infinite possibilities into a physical particle in space-time. Libet, on the other hand, found that decisions preceded will and awareness. Now, some proponents of the law of assumption or law of attraction or whatever you want to call it maintain that no one has free will but the person making the decision in their own reality. In other words, each of us lives in our own reality in which we create everything through imagination, even the people that we interact with. Hence, they act as we imagine them to act or as we expect them to act on the subconscious level. Pretty much like in a dream, where we create all the characters in our story, yet we perceive them as real and as separate from us. Of course, this sounds absolutely bonkers. After all, we are not dreaming, we are awake, and we live in the real world. And the characters around us feel real and have their own free will. True. But ask yourself, while you're dreaming, do you know that you're dreaming? When you're having a nightmare, do you know that you are asleep, or does it feel real? Unless you are having a lucid dream and you are aware on some level that you are dreaming, or unless you wake up, the reality of the dream feels absolutely real to you, does it not? You might argue that you can tell that a dream is a dream because you eventually wake up from it and realize that it was just an illusion. Yet, there is absolutely no way to prove that death is nothing but the awakening from an elaborate illusion of sorts. After all, Libet has proven that we make decisions unconsciously even before we are aware of them. Then we convince ourselves that we have come to that decision rationally and consciously. So we are perfectly able to delude ourselves. But there is actually a way to become lucid dreamers in this 3D reality. It may not be possible to fully awaken, but we can become aware of the fact that we are dreaming, that our outer world is an elaborate illusion created by our inner world of subconscious beliefs. In other words, we have will, but it's not free until we become aware that we are dreaming. Once we become aware that we are asleep, then we can start consciously directing our fate. If we are unaware that we are unconsciously creating, we think that life happens to us. We call ourselves lucky or unlucky, and we attribute events to chance and fate, all the while calling ourselves rational and logical. It's when we start seeing the correlation between our belief system and the events that we attract into our life that it becomes obvious. The unconscious is what is directing our existence, what is stirring the wheel of our destiny. Our unconscious is programmed in childhood by parents, guardians, and authority figures, then later on in life by the media and society at large. Finally, as we are biological beings, our unconscious, our primitive brain is affected by hormones such as dopamine, adrenaline, serotonin, testosterone, and chemicals such as caffeine, nicotine, and so on and so forth. Statements such as she has PMS or is thinking with his penis enrages, yet there is truth to them. We are driven by our biological urges until we program our subconscious to override them. So most of the time, we are driven by the programming of our childhood and by our physiological state and biological urges. Most of the time, we are not consciously creating. but simply reacting on automatic pilot to some external or internal stimulus. So how do we stop reacting to chemical and emotional stimuli and start creating consciously and attracting the life of our dreams? The answer is by first becoming aware of our unconscious reactions, then by reprogramming our subconscious mind with more positive beliefs. So we can use our free will not to force change, as it would be an impossible battle. As Libet showed, the show is run by the subconscious even when we're convinced that we are making rational decisions. We do have free will, but it's not used in making each decision one by one. That would completely overwhelm our rational mind. That would be an impossibly complicated show to run. No, the only free will that we do have is to reprogram our belief system, our unconscious. Then it will run our lives for us on automatic pilot, even when we think that we are making rational decisions one by one. In actual facts, our subconscious decides for us. Then our mind rationalizes and justifies the decision in hindsight. Now, let's go back for a moment to the ludicrous law of assumption claim that no one has free will in our own reality but ourselves. As crazy as it sounds, this theory is in line with Hugh Everett's interpretation of quantum physics, the many worlds interpretation, according to which all realities exist in parallel universes, and everything that can happen in the universe does happen in a parallel reality. In other words, every time an observation takes place, we don't create a different reality. We don't collapse the quantum wave function of infinite possibilities into a physical particle. We simply become aware or shift to the reality in which the observation takes place. As if I were dreaming my life and the characters in it, and while lucid dreaming, I would affect the future of the dream by choosing to observe a certain scenario. When we're not lucid dreaming, our unconscious does the choosing for us, and we feel trapped in our dream, unable to change its course one way or another. If during the day we've programmed our subconscious with negative stuff, it will affect our dream reality negatively, and vice versa. In this optic, the implication of the laws of assumption is that we are the only ones with free will in our reality. Does not sound so crazy. Although Everett's theory is not falsifiable, as we can only ever be aware of one reality at a time, it's mathematically sound and consistent with quantum physics findings. So it's not inconceivable that we live in an extremely realistic dream reality in which we, the dreamers, are the only ones with free will in our own dream. And everyone in our dream is mirroring our subconscious programming back to us, showing us the content of our unconscious, so that we may choose to alter it by an act of free will. So this is it for today. I hope you found this content interesting and helpful, and thank you for listening. Have a wonderful awakened day.